morning and welcome to Rising. You know, they say that three's a crowd, but here on our show, we don't believe in this elite consensus mainstream media nonsense. So no, have both Nomiki and Amber joining me today. Very excited to have you all part of the discussion. Let's get to it. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange spoke publicly this week for the first time since being freed from a high-security UK prison in June. He addressed a hearing at the Human Rights Committee of the Council of Europe in France. The whistleblower revealed he's still exhausted, recovering from being in prison for nearly 14 years. Here's what he had to say.
The transition from years of confinement in a maximum security prison to being here before the representatives of 46 nations and 700 million people is a profound and a surreal shift. The experience of isolation for years in a small cell is difficult to convey. It strips away one's sense of self, leaving only the raw essence of existence. I am yet not fully equipped to speak about what I have endured, the relentless struggle to stay alive, both physically and mentally.
Assange applauded the Obama Justice Department for not indicting him, but that changed in 2017. Watch.
The United States had never before prosecuted a publisher for publishing or obtaining government information. To do so would require a radical and ominous reinterpretation of the US Constitution. In January 2017, Obama also commuted the sentence of Manning, who had been convicted of being one of my sources. However, in February 2017, the landscape changed dramatically. President Trump had been elected. He appointed two wolves in MAGA hats, Mike Pompeo, a Kansas congressman and former arms industry executive, as CIA director, and William Barr, a former CIA officer, as U.S. Attorney General.
Assange was apprehended in 2010 after his site WikiLeaks released hundreds of thousands of U.S. classified documents on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It was considered the largest security breach of its kind in U.S. military history. In the years following his detention, he bounced around from prison in Britain, then fled to Ecuador's embassy, where he stayed for 7 years before being pulled out and transferred to London's Belmarsh top security jail for skipping bail. Joining us now to discuss is Julian Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton. Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, good to be with you.
Sure, so let's get right into it. This is the first time that Julian has been speaking publicly since being released from prison in this deal, and he says notably, I pleaded guilty to doing journalism. I mean, the unprecedented nature of this, should we expect more from him in terms of what he endured, a defense of WikiLeaks? This truly is, I think, such a malpractice from the U.S. government that I'd like to hear more from him if he's open to speaking out.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Julian has now rejoined public life. This is his first outing in the public since he was released from prison a few months ago. He pleaded guilty to a single conviction under the Espionage Act, and this committee in the Council of Europe was formed, and yesterday they actually voted. The entire Council of Europe voted on the findings of the committee that this conviction under the Espionage Act is actually a threat to journalists and the public's right to know all through Europe and the representative countries of the Council of Europe. So I think that's significant that these parliamentarians see it as a threat to press freedoms in Europe, and I think we'll see reciprocal type proceedings, hopefully in the U.S. Congress. Looking into this unprecedented nature of this Espionage Act conviction and what it means to the First Amendment in your country, in the United States. Yeah. So I expect we'll see more of these hearings, more of these investigations into what actually went on. You heard from Julian speaking about the CIA plots that were initiated under then CIA Director Mike Pompeo, plots to assassinate Julian while he was in the embassy, plots to kidnap him, that made it as high as the Trump White House at the time. So there is definitely a lot to investigate and a lot to dig into over the last years in what happened to Julian.
Very much so. His phrasing, Julian's phrasing that he used there, I thought was so interesting. Wolves in MAGA hats, with reference to Pompeo and Barr. So am I to take it then that what he sees the problem is a sort of behind the scenes, entrenched federal government, the G-men, this what some people call the deep state, operating on their own, with their own agenda, independent of perhaps Trump or whoever the political figure is? That seems to me what his framing suggests, and I wonder if you have any more insight into that.
Well, it's a good point, Robbie, and I think we can see there was no change in the position of the Biden administration. This conviction came under the DOJ of the Biden administration. So you have that sort of flow on from Bill Barr, Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who initiated this prosecution, to a Merrick Garland DOJ, who finished the job. So I think there is a strata of people in the in both U.S. administrations who really want to go after people who are exposing information in the public interest, particularly information that relates to the intelligence community or the endless wars that are going on around the world, and the involvement of the U.S. military in those. So I think there definitely is a strata of people in these institutions. Julian referred to two individuals in particular, but they do exist in both administrations.
I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about what happened when the plea deal was struck and what occurred when there was this trade-off in the Mariana Islands. I mean, it was straight out of a movie. His whole life is straight out of a movie. But I'm especially in relation to the supposed deep state, I found it quite interesting that Julian mentioned the Defense Contractor Association that these MAGA figures had, and did that assert any pressure against the Biden administration DOJ in that there is this pushback against the Trump's role in the DOJ and his administration officials versus the Biden administration. Sure, America's America, and we all have our own national security interests that our lawmakers push forward. But the timing of that and the plea deal seemed very interesting, and I'm just curious if you could illustrate a little bit more about why that happened then and how it played out behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, I guess Julian's whole saga and his whole persecution is Hollywood fodder, right? You've got CIA plots, the Ecuadorian government involved, his time in the embassy, the spying in the embassy that went on, high definition cameras installed, and ultra-sensitive microphones, and that material being sent back to headquarters in the United States every 15 days. So there is a lot to talk about, and I'm sure it's going to make a great film and a very good book one day. I think what really points to the conviction that Julian had to agree to in exchange for his freedom, that one conviction under the Espionage Act, was that the very same day James Clapper came out and said that he was happy with this conviction, and that they wouldn't have expected any more jail time had Julian been convicted, had Julian gone and fought in front of the courts in the United States. So he did receive a sentence, which was 5 years. That was time served that he did in a maximum security prison in London. But I think that speaks to exactly what we're talking about here, is James Clapper coming out and giving the conviction that rubber stamp, saying that the intelligence community actually got what they wanted here. They got that restriction of the Constitution, that the First Amendment doesn't actually apply if you're publishing this type of national defense information.
Has there been any talk of him receiving a pardon for his actions, given that so many of us feel that this was an act of journalism? And also, could you just briefly tell us before we let you go, you're a member of his family, is his health recovering or things of that nature?
Yeah, he's getting a lot of sunshine. He's spending time with his kids now. Yeah, it's a very different world for him to come to terms with, being a father to two small children, 5 and 7-year-old, my nephews. So yeah, he's getting back on the road to recovery. He's looking much better now than when he came out. I think he still needs a lot of time to sort of rest, recuperate, and just really come to terms, with what went on. And get back into a sort of normal mode of life, get out of that survival mode that he's been in for the last 14 years. We are pursuing a pardon. The campaign is continuing and pursuing a pardon for Julian. I think that would be a way for either administration to send a clear message to those who pursued this prosecution, like the Pompeos, the Clappers of the world, that this is a futile exercise, that even if you do try and use the Espionage Act to go after these people, we're going to reverse that. So don't waste your time in future. So I think it would be a pardon for press freedom in that sense, and a strong signal that either administration stands up for freedom of speech and press freedoms in the United States.
And really briefly, before we let you go, have you spoken to either of the presidential campaigns in the past months since this plea deal was reached?
I haven't spoken directly to either of the campaigns. I've spoken to our supporters in the Congress on both sides of the aisle, and they are very keen to support a pardon bid for Julian. Obviously, there's people in President Trump's camp who have been saying that they would, such as Robert Kennedy Jr., who was part of his campaign, said that he would pardon Julian on day one of his presidency. Now he's part of, he's sort of joined forces with President Trump now. So I hope he's advocating with President Trump for a pardon for Julian, but we'll also be focusing on the Biden administration and getting the civil liberty groups and also all the journalists out there who could be advocating and explaining to the Biden administration why this pardon actually matters to journalists and the press freedom community as a whole.
Gabriel Shipton, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure, and we're glad to hear Julian is doing much better. Thank you.